Hello everyone and welcome to Fiction Friday. Today we have episode 32 of The Squire. I hope you enjoy it.
Everything in Cole screamed at him to rush in and cut the Black Knight down, but the voice of his mentor warned against charging in blind. Cole didn't fear facing the knight in battle, but the threat of getting blasted to bits before he even reached his opponent brought him up short. "We need to get the royals out of here." Beside him, Maines had his sword out for all the good it would do against these enemies. The guardsmen must have read Maines's mind because they formed a circle around the king and queen and started for the nearest door. Jonas stood between Zarin and the fleeing group. He held out both hands and summoned a circle of white energy. Zarin raised his hand and black flames flickered around it. A stream of flames shot out, hammering into Jonas's defense. Beside him, Alana raised her hands and reinforced Jonas's shield. Cole didn't think it would be enough, but to his surprise, when the torrent of flame ended, the shield still held, albeit with dozens of cracks. Zarin must have sensed Alana helping. He turned their way while the Black Prince rushed toward the fleeing royals. On the other wall, forgotten by all, the second Lightcaster fled the throne room. Cole hoped to collect Prince Adam and get him to safety. Speaking of getting to safety, Zarin pointed at them, and the flames swirled to life again. "Scatter!" Cole shouted. A moment later, flames blasted through the space he had just vacated. No one screamed, so he dared hope they'd all leapt clear. He rolled to his feet in time to see Zarin turn back towards the fleeing royals. 4 guards had stopped to engage the Black Prince. The massive sword rose and fell, cutting one of the guards in half. A second thrust at his chest. The guard's sword screeched like nails on slate across the black breastplate, leaving not so much as a scratch. A moment later, the giant sword rose and fell a second time, bisecting the unfortunate guard. Zarin's next blast shattered Jonas's shield. It tore through his body and continued on to kill 3 guards behind him. The king and queen had almost reached the door when a wall of black flames sprung up between them and the door. Cole grimaced. He hated to leave them, but his only hope now of saving the sword was the prince. "Alana!" The Lightcaster looked toward the trapped royals, then back to him. "We can't help them. Do you know where the prince is?" A pained look crossed her face. "I can find him." "Good. Let's go while we can." Maines and his rangers followed Cole and Alana across the throne room to the door the Lightcaster had exited earlier. No black flames impeded them as they fled the slaughter. The door led to a paneled hall. Maines slammed the door shut behind them, as if it would slow the Darkcaster for more than half a second. Alana concentrated for a moment, then pointed right. "He's that direction and moving further away." "Let's go." Cole ran down the hall beside Alana. "Can the other Lightcaster open portals like you?" "I didn't get a very good sense of her power, but if she was high-ranking enough to serve at the king's side, I suspect she's strong enough to open one." "If she has the prince, why didn't they portal out of here?" She glanced at Cole. "That's an excellent question." Her brows tightened as she concentrated. "Zarin raised a barrier around the castle. He must have conjured it the moment he arrived. We'll have to get outside the walls before we can escape." "Shit. I was afraid it was something like that." Alana grabbed his arm and pulled him to a stop in front of a heavy oak door. They went through there. She sealed the door behind them. "I can kick it down." Maines moved to the front of the group. Alana put a gentle hand on his shoulder. "She didn't lock it. It's sealed with magic. You couldn't knock it down with a battering ram." "Great." Maines gave the door a kick for good measure. "So what do we do now?" "We'll head to the courtyard. Hopefully we can catch them there." Cole turned to Alana. "If she gets out, will the Lightcaster be able to open a portal to Celestia?" Alana shook her head. "You have to open the portal a specific way to get past the wards. No one trained outside the country knows how. I can't even guess where she might go." "Let's hope we catch them in the courtyard." An explosion shook the hall. A moment later, the grim form of the Black Prince stepped through the ruins of the throne room door. "We're out of time! Run!" They ran, Cole in the lead, down the hall and around a corner, out of sight and hopefully out of range of Zarin's blasts. Dim afternoon light shone through windows lining the hall. They'd reached an outside wall. "Can you enlarge those windows and get us to the ground?" "No problem." Alana raised her hand and blasted the window, its frame, and a good-sized chunk of wall out into the courtyard. "Everyone gather around." They all huddled as close to her as possible. A bubble of white light surrounded them, and a moment later they flew through the ruined window and down to the courtyard. The bubble vanished when they reached the ground, and Alana bent over, gasping for air. A hemisphere of dark energy surrounded the castle. Cole assumed the dome prevented them from opening a portal out. He only hoped it wouldn't stop them from walking out. Cole knelt beside Alana. "You okay?" "That took more out of me than I expected. I need to catch my breath." Cole looked up at Maines and the Rangers. "Fan out and find the prince. We'll see about getting the portcullis open." Maines looked like a drowning man offered a life preserver. No doubt the Ranger commander felt relieved to get a task he could accomplish without having to worry about magic. Using silent gestures, he divided up his men and they ran in opposite directions around the castle. Alana straightened up and wiped the sweat from her brow. "I'm ready." They ran toward the gatehouse. Alana's breath rasped as they went, and Cole feared she might not have strength enough to open a portal even if they escaped the castle. Halfway to the gatehouse, a pair of saber fangs emerged, carrying blood-soaked scimitars. The guards wouldn't be opening the gate for them. Alana raised her trembling hand, and a glow formed. Cole grabbed her wrist. "I'll handle them. Save your power." Cole moved away from the exhausted lightcaster and raised his new sword. Time to see what the royal blade would do in a real fight. One of the saber fangs raised his curved sword and charged. Cole leapt to meet it, their blades crashing together. The vibration he expected from the hard impact never reached his hands. Perhaps part of the magic protected him. He stepped back and counter-slashed, the royal sword moving twice as fast as his old sword. Before the saber fang could react, Cole slashed it across the chest deep enough that it fell down dead. He moved to engage the second monster, who had sufficient intelligence to look nervous. Cole slashed high at the saber fang's head. When it raised its sword to block, he reversed his momentum, spun, and slashed low, taking the saber fang's legs off at the knee. A thrust through the chest finished the snarling monster. They left the dead beastman bleeding in the dirt and headed toward the gatehouse. Cole couldn't stop his grin. Danger be damned. He'd never used a weapon as perfect as the royal sword. It moved as much by his thoughts as his muscles, and the edge cut like nothing he'd ever seen. If he could face the Black Knight without Zarin interfering, Cole thought he had a chance of killing him. "Can you make a light?" Cole asked. "It'll be dark in the gatehouse." Alana smiled. "Focus on your sword and imagine the blade glowing." Cole did as she said, and a moment later a pure white light radiated from the blade. His smile broadened. "What else can it do?" "If we get out of here alive, you can ask King Jared. That was the only trick I knew for sure." Cole resolved to do just that. "Wait here while I check for more beastmen." He left Alana by the door and ducked inside. The coppery tang of blood reached him a moment before he saw the two dead guards lying by the busted windlass. The saber fangs had smashed the handle in half. How would they open the portcullis now? He searched the blood-stained room and found nothing useful until he opened a storage locker. Inside, he found a rope ladder with hooks to attach it to the top of the wall. He snapped his fingers. That was their way out. "Cole!" Alana shouted to get his attention. He grabbed the ladder and rushed out. From the side of the castle, he spotted Maines, the Rangers, and Prince Adam and his guardian running toward them. Cole rushed up the stairs to the top of the wall. It only took a few seconds to set the ladder in place and toss it over the side. Mains's group had covered half the distance to the wall, but behind them, Zarin and the Black Prince were emerging from a hole blown in the wall. Zarin raised his hand. Cole pointed behind the fleeing group, desperate to warn them out of the way. Maines glanced over his shoulder and jumped toward Prince Adam and the Lightcaster. He knocked them to the ground an instant before black flames screamed over their heads. Two of the Rangers disintegrated in the blast. The moment the fire stopped, Maines lifted his charges to their feet and they ran for the wall. The Lightcaster pulled away from Maines and turned to face Zarin. She had to know she had no chance. Maines, the prince, and the surviving rangers reached the stairs and rushed up to join Cole and Alana. "Belle!" Prince Adam stared down to where the female lightcaster stood facing Zarin and the Black Prince. Belle's body glowed and almost appeared to vibrate. Cole had never seen a lightcaster look that way. Cole knelt beside the prince, a blond boy about 10 years old. "We need to go, Majesty. Belle's buying time for you to escape." "I won't leave her." "Belle!" The rangers started down the ladder as fast as they could go. "This is all for nothing if you can't get the kid down the ladder," Maines said. "I'll get him down. You go first and get ready." Maines raised an eyebrow, then nodded and started down the ladder. Out in the courtyard, Zarin sent a blast at Belle, who raised a shield and blocked it. Cole blinked, surprised she survived even one blast. "We're down," Maines said. "Time to go, Majesty," Cole said. The boy shot him a fierce look. "I told you I'm not leaving her." He shook his head, picked up the prince, and walked to the edge of the wall. Maines stared up at him, eyes wide. "Catch!" Cole tossed the wriggling boy off the wall. Zarin finished the king and queen, then turned his attention to the boy. He sensed the prince fleeing a little ways away in the same direction the squire from Corinthia had run. The sight of the squire had startled Zarin, but didn't really surprise him. It seemed the boy meant to make a permanent nuisance of himself. He left the still smoking bodies of the royal family and their pathetic guards and started toward the prince. Zarin blasted the door to splinters, not because he needed to, but just for the sheer joy of destroying it. He stepped into the hall in time to see the squire and his companions flee around a corner. Cowardice or wisdom, he could find no fault in the boy's reasoning. Halfway down the hall, Zarin sensed light energy blocking a door. So, the prince had gone this way and his would-be rescuers couldn't follow. How convenient. He placed a hand on the sealed door and dark fire burst from his fingers, reducing the door to ash in an instant. Behind the door, a stairway led down to the ground floor. They made their way down the stairs, the only sound the clanking of his servants' boots on the stone steps. At the bottom of the steps, they came to another sealed door. Zarin shook his head. Stairways and doors. Perhaps the next people he killed he'd take to a field or forest first. This was getting tedious. The second door lasted no longer than the first, and when Zarin stepped through, he found a short hall leading to the courtyard. A little ways ahead, he spotted the fleeing prince and a lightcaster of middling power. He judged their path and pointed at the wall. When they ran past it, he blasted the wall and sent jagged shards of stone flying toward the prince. No bleeding bodies greeted him on the other side of the hole. In fact, he found more targets. Some of the squire's troops had joined up with the lightcaster and her charge, and now they hustled them toward the castle wall. Zarin raised a hand and called for the fire. More targets were always more fun. The stream of dark fire killed 2 of the soldiers, but everyone else dove under it. The survivors leapt to their feet and raced toward the wall. Halfway there, the lightcaster pulled away and turned to face him. He would have laughed if he thought the woman worth the effort to draw a breath. Her body glowed, then grew blurry as it vibrated. Well, the girl had courage, tapping her life force to increase her power, not that it would matter. Zarin sent a blast of dark fire at her. She raised a shield, and the flames splashed against it. When he ended his assault, the lightcaster still stood, steaming and singed, a determined scowl on her face. "I won't let you have him." "Let me? That implies you have the power to stop me." Zarin raised both hands and summoned a ball of dark fire. It grew until the ball was the size of his head before he loosed it at the pest. The ball hit her shield, shattered it, and detonated. When the dust settled, a hole 10 feet deep and 30 around graced the courtyard. Nothing remained of the lightcaster. He looked up to see his prey's reaction, but found the wall empty.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Fiction Friday. If you liked what you heard, you can find more of my fiction on my website, jamesewisher.com. Please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with anyone else you think might enjoy the show. Until next week, goodbye.